I'm Felina.
And I'm Summer.
And you are listening to Broken Broken.
Because we're both.
The podcast about living your best life by getting real.
Welcome back, broken people. This is Summer.
And this is Felina.
And today we have
my good friend Alex Rains. And he's going to talk to us today about his heroin addiction and recovery from. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I guess tell me a little first, how long have you been sober?
So I have been off the junk now. I don't want to say sober because I do still drink.
Right.
And I do still smoke pot.
Yeah.
But I have been off the junk since let's see here, it would have been Cinco de Mayo, so May 5th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're about 6-7 months.
Six. Yeah. I kind of quit counting a while ago. I've been off and on it for a while now, so I gave up on counting time and just focus on
the day-to-day.
Just day-to-day, and just keeping a healthy mindset.
Okay.
So.
Well, you and I've known you for a very long time, since you were like 17, 18. I don't know, how old are you?
Absolutely.
At Hastings?
I think I had just turned 18, and we met at a Halloween party, actually.
Oh, yeah. It was at my house.
It was. So we met at a Halloween party and just hit it off immediately.
Yeah, and we were all working at Hastings at the time. I had no idea you were going to become such a long-term friend.
It's crazy how people cross paths.
Yeah, but so at 18, I mean, obviously, like, you came to our house and we're drinking beer or whatever. Mm-hmm. But like, where did you first, like, when did it happen that you first decided to do heroin? Like, how does that even happen?
So it actually didn't start with heroin for me. I grew up locally here in Norman, and when I was in high school, obviously high schoolers do what high schoolers do, so we were partying, and for me it started with actually my first love before heroin was cocaine. It was really big while I was in school, and it was accessible, and so that's kind of what kick-started it. And I'd say probably my first substance abuse issue would have been with cocaine, and then
and that was when you were in high school?
That's when I was in high school, and that went on probably until I was about 19 or 20. Mm-hmm. And then I had a scary situation arise, the first of many, where I did a lot too much one night, and kind of freaked myself out and had to take a step back from that. And so I had a great group of friends through high school, and we did what younger kids do. We experimented a lot. At that time, too, OxyContin was still really readily available, and so Oxy and Coke were kind of the two big things, and I happened to love both of them. But I really didn't get into opiates. For me, it started with prescription drugs until I was probably 21 or 22. I had a good group of friends that were all living together, and
where would you get the pills?
So, I had a friend whose grandmother actually was chronic with cancer, but was not taking her pain medication, so it was readily available to another friend, and it started out just kind of sporadically. We'd at this point I was just taking them orally, and we would do that and drink and get a good buzz going, and that developed into, actually, one of my best friends was far deeper into it than I was, and we kind of followed each other down that path. Then I got myself into, for me, it wasn't just the use, it was the lifestyle that came with it.
Okay.
I delved into distribution, I guess, if you will. Distribution, if you will, of several different substances, and with that came, really for me, it kind of filled up a hole. I grew up a heavy guy, and just never really felt like I fit in And so I was a chameleon from a young age.
Yeah.
Which has been great as I've gotten older. It's allowed me to really, I don't want to say mold myself, but my experiences have turned it into a point where I'd like to think that I'm approachable to most people just because I've always had to live my life that way. The difference now is that I'm able to be genuine when I do that instead of hiding this affliction that I've got. So yeah, jumped into it, and with that came a lot of things that I felt like I'd missed out on earlier in life.
Just like the friendship
The
groups and feeling
friendship,
belonging.
yeah, and when you have something that so many people want,
it makes you feel important.
It
needed.
does, and
Yeah.
you've got people around you, and nobody particularly enjoys that feeling. At least I never did, of just feeling alone. And for a long time, for me, I could be in a crowded room but still feel alone.
Yeah.
And so what that did for me was it gave me a purpose. The phone would ring and there'd be a constant group of people there, and with that came money and power, if you will, and some attraction from the opposite sex, and all of these things that I had craved or just put a big value on. As a younger guy, those were of like paramount importance to me because I looked around and I would see all of these guys that I thought I wanted to be like, and they were doing all of this, and so it allowed me to live a lifestyle that I felt like I wanted to live. But in actuality, through all of it, I found myself just completely miserable, regardless of who was around or how much money was in my pocket, or it just, nothing was able to fill up that hole, and I didn't understand it until a lot later. I really didn't understand that I was kind of treating the symptoms, I guess the ism
of depression, perhaps,
depression, or just I feel like with most addicts or alcoholics, they call it alcoholism, and for me, I think the ism has been the thing that's kind of haunted me the most. It's just that feeling inside of never being good enough, and just I functioned on fear for such a long time, and functioning on fear put me in some really rough places, and took me to do some things that I never thought that I'd do. I grew up in a really good household, to two hardworking parents,
middle class.
Yeah, middle
white
class.
Dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Here in the US.
Typical millennial. And it was interesting growing up. My father was pretty self-made and worked his way up from the bottom to a pretty prominent position with the company that he was with. So with that came a lot of lifestyle changes with the family, and so we kind of moved up from that lower middle class to being pretty we found some prosperity, and so things changed, and I looked around, and for me it just seemed like everybody around me put such a value on what you had, and so I thought that's what life was. It was like what you've got defines you as who you are, and the people that want to be around you. And I just didn't have enough self-respect at that point to realize that I was surrounding myself with people that didn't necessarily want to be around me. They wanted to be around what I had. And
they were using you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how old were you during this period, during your distribution?
I was really in pretty heavily from, I think I started small when I was about 22, and then found myself moving up the ranks, if you will, to being in pretty deep by about the time I was about 24.
And had you started doing heroin yourself yet?
So I had not started doing heroin myself yet. At this point, what I was actually doing, the first time I used any drug intravenously, I was 23, and at that point I was using OxyContin or Roxyset.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I
So,
don't know
yeah.
things. Yeah.
I remember it to a T. I had a couple friends that were doing it, and I'd always sworn that that was something I was like, nah, I don't need to do that. And I'm guilty of laying judgment off on those before. I was like, oh, that's what a bunch of junkies. I just like to party, and I guess because I was just snorting them or eating them, that I put myself on a bit of a pedestal. And then eventually that quit working, and I found myself in a spot where I was just like, I'm gonna give this a shot, and it was love at love at first sight. So I actually really didn't get into heroin until I'd used it like once or twice just because it was around, and at this point I was so physically dependent on opiates that I would take whatever was available. And I found myself in treatment. Actually, I went to a rehab for the first time in 2012.
So you would have been...
So at that point I would have been, let's see here.
6 years ago?
That would have been, 6 years ago, so I would have been 24.
Okay.
And I didn't go to rehab because I wanted to go to rehab. I went to rehab because I wanted to fade some heat. My family, it's very noticeable when I'm under the influence. My attitude changes and my priorities change dramatically. And so...
So your parents knew?
Yeah, they had an idea, and I was pretty honest with them about my opiate use. I was doing things that were uncharacteristic, like disappearing just for weeks at a time and not answering the phone, and just kind of crashing different couches from here and there, and going where the party was. And while most people were waking up and going to work or going to class, I was staying up and doing my thing until 4 or 5 in the morning, and then sleeping until 2, and then waking up. And at that point it was time to hustle, if you will, and do what I needed to do to get through the day and get what I needed. So my lifestyle changed, and it was uncomfortable. It was not anything that I was used to, but I learned quickly how to survive and manipulate my way into getting what I felt like I needed to get through each day. And so I found myself in treatment.
So you were trying to get away from some heat?
Yeah, I mean, my folks were like, listen, you're not yourself. We want you to go to rehab. And they were still helping me out a little bit.
Financially?
Financially, they were helping me out. It had gone from making money and putting that money towards the things that I needed to making money and then immediately turning it around to get just what I needed to make enough money for the next day, so that I could make sure to stay well and just living day to day.
When you say stay well, can you kind of give, because I know a lot of people who haven't been around opiate withdrawals don't know what that's like.
So with opiates, one of the things is with long-term use, your body becomes physically dependent. And once you're physically dependent, you have essentially a window of time from the time that you use the last time until the time that your body you become sick, and it's not just it's kind of a double-edged sword. Mentally, the craving is there, but physically, you go through some symptoms very similar to like the flu. A lot of cold sweats, your body hurts, restless leg. It's just miserable. And so it went from being like I want to get high to being like, well, I need to do what I need to do to make sure that I'm not sick tomorrow. What am I going to do? And so what that turns into is, at this point, the recreation and the activity of using was gone, and it would be something like I could have an abundance of whatever substance it was that I felt like I needed, and even though I had that in front of me, I was always a step ahead, worried about when I was not going to have that. And so opiate addiction really reached out and kind of just punched me in the face. And I remember the first time being sick going, what is this all about? But I knew from that moment on I never wanted to feel that way again. Come to find out, I found myself in that situation many times since. But it took over, and it changed me. It changed my personality a lot. And as a depressant too, my mental health really took a dive too. I found myself in a really dark spot. The things that I had grown up enjoying really took a back seat to just making sure that I could stay high or even just stay well, as you'll find some people say it, just to stay unsick. So
just enough to keep from going into
exactly
withdrawals. Yeah,
just enough. Yeah, I just want to make sure, because for me, the second you get sick, it's like it's a paralyzing episode, if you will, because you're just so sick, you just feel like you can't get up and do anything. the flip side of that is that you'll put yourself in some really insane situations in order to in order to make sure that doesn't happen. So yeah, went to rehab for the first time in a little place here in Oklahoma, and
At 24.
At 24.
This is first time in rehab.
First time in rehab,
I
yeah.
know there were several.
First of several.
How long did you stay the first time?
So I completed the program in 83 days, and I thought at that point it was like, I know what I need to do. I just need, for me, it was just as simple as just not doing. I just won't do them. That's what I told myself, which I found to be just a really unrealistic expectation for something that's as gripping and as powerful as that. I've come to find out there are some things I have to do on a personal level to maintain a mindset that keeps me away from that lifestyle. And so I got out, and I was very arrogant about my condition and did exactly the opposite of what they told me to do, and ended up as sick as this is. Women are a big part of my story as well. So as sick as they tell you when you're cleaning your life up, stay out of relationships for a while. It's supposed to be this time of self-exploration, and so me being the genius that I thought I was, I got out and immediately got into a relationship, interestingly enough, with a girl that used to be a client of mine when I was distributing. But I thought that since it wasn't opiates that I usually dealt with her, that it would be okay. And within a month, we had moved in together, and within about 6 weeks, I was back at it. So I went on about an 11-month bender, if you will, where I managed to just burn whatever bridges I had left in place, and found myself in treatment. And at this point,
For the second time.
Yeah, for the second time. And at this point, it was not, I was not of the opinion that I was going to do just enough to get by. Every time I used for oblivion. I wanted to get as high as possible and stay as high as possible. And I told myself, just because of that feeling, like, this is what I want to do all the time. And so I managed to ruin a relationship pretty quickly, and I found myself in the darkest spot that I've been mentally after 11 months of heavy IV use, and the heroin had really come into the picture at this point, because as some people know, this would have been around
2013?
Yeah, right around 2013. They kind of started to crack down on prescription drugs in the state. So it became
familiar. Yeah.
Sure. So it became not as available, but the demand is still there. So heroin became very popular among the circle of people that I was surrounding myself with, and it was in my opinion, it was a great solution in that moment. It was cheaper.
I've actually heard and read some stories about people who actually needed the opioids for pain meds or whatever, like turning to heroin because it became too expensive, which is so wild to think about.
Absolutely. And I was still very naive as to what the consequences of heroin use were. At this point, I'd had no one close or knew nobody that had passed away from overdoses. But what I managed to do in that 11-month span was catch my first felony.
Or
it was for false declaration of ownership to a pawn shop. So allegedly, I, quote unquote, according to the Cleveland County District Attorney, I sold a stolen TV to a pawn shop, and so I was sitting on my patio.
And this was to get money for drugs.
Absolutely, yeah. Every dollar, every buck that I had come in at that point, it was like basically like if I had $100 in my pocket, it would be like, okay, sweet, I've got $94 for heroin and $6 for a pack of cigarettes, and I was fine. Like I was on cloud nine at that point because I knew that day was going to be all right. And so I was actually sitting on my patio in my apartment at this point. And two of Norman's finest showed up and said they wanted to ask me a couple questions. And I said, well, that's cool. We can talk. You guys just stay on that side of the patio and I'll stay right here. And they said, that's not quite how this works out. So they came in and, so I got a free ride to
taxi service.
Yeah, exactly. So I got a free ride in my first experience with handcuffs that evening. And
you were 25.
I was 25, and it was embarrassing. My aunt worked for the district attorney's office for about 30 years. And my mother had worked for the Cleveland County Courthouse as a court reporter for, off and on since about 1990. So it's not like this was one of those things that I was going to be able to brush under the table. So I had to get honest about that. And I found myself in treatment for the second time. I went to Valley Hope here in Cushing. And even those consequences at that point were not enough. I went to Valley Hope and made it 22 days at Valley Hope. And then, again, being the genius that I am, ended up getting high in treatment, which they frown upon. Yes. And so, but that was a little bit of a blessing in itself because they referred me to a treatment center in Arizona. And so on January 4th of 2014, I packed up and moved and went to 5 months of inpatient treatment in a place in Prescott, Arizona, and cleaned up and managed to stay sober at that point for about 13 months. But again, got myself involved in a bad relationship with somebody and then decided
Did you meet her in rehab?
I did.
Yeah, I recall this one.
Yeah, I met her in rehab, so of course I was like, it's meant to be. And she was from Enid, and we were in Arizona, so I was like, oh, that's a sign. And I have some sick thoughts. Made it about 13 months and then got a great job opportunity in Austin. And we both packed up and moved to Austin, Texas. And I, again, was doing absolutely nothing to maintain a healthy, mindset. And I got to Austin, and within, this is just crazy. Within about 10 days, I knew nobody there, and I was working I guess you could call it a corporate job. So just to kind of give you a picture of that desperation, here I am. I know nobody in Austin, but I Googled what the bad neighborhoods were. And so I'm in Austin, Texas, in office attire, basically pounding the pavement out there, walking around cold calling, basically being like, hey, where can I score some dope? And that had to have just been an obscene thing to witness, but
And you had been sober for 13 months.
13 months.
And after 10 days in Austin, you decided...
Yeah, I decided, it would probably be a good idea. Life is really good right now. I should start doing heroin again. And
and your girlfriend at the time, did she know this, or was she...
So she was sober, but also... how can I put this nicely? We were just very sick together, and we fed off each other's sickness. So what that looked like was, so before I'd gone to Austin, we had a puppy, and this dog got sick, and it also had separation anxiety. And so I take this dog to the vet, and I'm like, listen, this dog freaks out every time I leave, and she tears stuff up. So the vet actually wrote my puppy a prescription for Xanax, and of the 60 Xanax that they prescribed the dog, I want to say I'm pretty positive she got 0 of them. So I was like, well, I'm anxious, and so.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So Is
it the same shit?
It's not
as human Xanax.
Oh yeah, no. It was actual from the pharmacy Xanax. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
I would never even have thought. That's creative.
Oh, it gets
creative,
even.
Alex.
It gets even better. So I'm eating my dog Xanax and.
Like you do.
Right. And she's eating the dog Xanax as well, and then she decides it'd be a good idea to start drinking on top of him. So what it looked like. For a while, yeah. So what it looked like for a while was I would wake up and take just enough to keep the edge off and go to work, And she would sit at home and drink a fifth of Tito's, vodka a day, and eat Xanax. And so the dog runs out of the prescription, and we take her to a different vet in Austin. And I'm like, listen, what you gave us was not enough. And she ends up writing just an astronomical amount of Xanax for my dog, which would have been like a human supply for probably 60 days. And that was gone within 2 weeks.
So drug shopping at the vet instead of the ER.
Yeah, drug shopping.
That is so creative.
And so after that 14 days, I called the vet and I'm like, look, this dog's still freaking out. And she writes me another script. And so I go to fill my dog's prescription at Walmart. And they're like, your dog has been red flagged by the DEA. So I had a puppy that was on the DEA drug watch list. So that was a high point in my using career. So yeah.
So you were in Austin.
So yeah, I'm in Austin.
Eating your dog's Xanax and pounding the pavement in your business attire.
Yeah, and so
searching for notes.
and so
You're
one
25.
day, so yeah, exactly. I'm 25, and one day, I'm in this, this really not so great neighborhood in Austin, and end up meeting, I believe she was a hooker, and she's like, "You're down here to score," and I was like, "It's funny you ask, because I am." And so she introduces me to her pimp / drug dealer, and
like you do.
right,
Yeah.
and so we end up becoming business associates, and what that looks like is like every day at lunch, because I kind of had my own. I made my own hours initially. I was able to be in and out. So it would be like I'd go to work for like 2 hours in the morning, and then I would go and meet my drug dealer at whatever shady motel he was in, and get high and play like NBA 2K with my drug dealer for like 2 hours, and then go back to work and like nod out. And here I am in this multi-million-dollar business, in slacks and a dress shirt, in the bathroom at work, shooting up heroin, which is just not normal.
No.
And so that came to a close pretty quickly. About 3 months into my Austin adventure, I had been up all night doing drugs, and I'm at work and just could not stay awake. And I'm like, okay, this is bad. So I remember leaving and going down to the gas station to grab an energy drink. I'm like, this will help wake me up a little bit. I'm just going to take the rest of the afternoon off. Well, I fall asleep behind the wheel on a very dangerous highway, and came to 3 lanes over into oncoming traffic, and overcorrected and had a head-on collision at about 60 miles an hour. And, by the grace of God, neither one of us were injured.
Oh, wow.
Both vehicles were totaled. But at that point, there wasn't really any hiding what was going on anymore. So call mom to tell her that I've absolutely just destroyed the vehicle that I was driving at the time. And
she thinks at this time you're still sober.
Yeah, but I think at this point she had a hunch. So later that night, we get a knock on the door, and here is my mom, who has driven all the way from Norman without telling me.
Such a mom move.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. She has this crazy
6 hours, 7 hours down to Austin.
Right.
Yeah.
And she's just like, "You're getting high again." And I was like, at that point, I was like, "Yes, I am." And so, obviously was in a very toxic relationship at that point. And what that looked like was, I was like, all right, Angela and I are in a bad way. So, put her on a train, and she goes back to Enid, and I'm like, I'm going to go back out to Arizona where I had some success, and got into a program out there and did really well for about 10 months.
So that would be your 4th time?
This would be Rehab 4. Yeah. So, get out there, do really well, and meet yet again another girl in Arizona.
So do we understand the pattern now?
I was starting
Alex likes the lady.
Yeah, I was starting to kind of get the hint, but I was staying sober, but there was a no relationship policy in the house that I was at, and they were going to offer me a job, so I just decided to keep this new relationship on the down low. And just to kind of give you an idea of how sick this was, because of what had happened, my failure, or my, the hard lesson I'd learned about getting into a relationship newly in sobriety, I went to the treatment center that I'd gone to beforehand to speak to the client base there. And that's actually where I met Jenny, giving the conversation about what not to do. And then naturally, Jenny and I end up in a relationship.
Of course.
So that was a pretty scumbag move. But anyways...
It's okay, Alex. We forgive you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, she's actually to this day, you know, she's doing great and is one of my best friends. So yeah, I made it about 10 months. Graduated the program at 6 months. We ended up getting a place together and was happy for about 2 months, and then just kind of started to get the itch again. And had a friend call me and was like, "I'm gonna go pick up. I'm gonna go and score." And I was like at work, working for this rehab facility, and I'm like, you know what, that sounds like I can get away with it one time. So I take the company vehicle. I'm in the or
the rehab center that
I'm in the rehab van. I pick him up, we go to pick up, pull into a parking lot, thankfully at a medical center, and decide to shoot up like in the car, and I overdose.
Oh,
Immediately.
No.
Overdose immediately in the front seat of this van. And the buddy that I was with, that I had used with, rushes inside and gets a doctor from this like emergency medical center that's right there. And next thing I know, I'm coming to, and the EMT's got his finger down my throat, and they're trying to get me to breathe. And I'm like, this is not good. And so they take me to the hospital, and I'm like, okay. And I tried to lie to him at first. I was like, I just took some Tylenol PM. I haven't been sleeping well. And they're like, well, you can either go to the... I was like, you have to let me go. I know my rights. They were like, well, we'll let you go, but you can talk to these sheriffs that are out there. I was like, well, you probably better take me to the hospital so I can get checked out then if that's the case. And so I go, and 6 hours later, I'm thinking like, this is really weird. I guess I'm stable now. They're like, you're gonna get released soon. Just chill. And I'm like, in my own insanity, I'm like, well, I need the keys back to the vehicle so I can go back to work. No one will ever know. And here comes two officers that arrest me, and this was felony number 2. I get arrested for internal possession of narcotics. My blood tested positive for heroin metabolites. And in the lovely state of Arizona, they can charge you for possession of a substance if it's in your blood system. So I go to jail in Arizona, and the company vehicle that was supposed to be to transport all of these guys that are trying to improve their lives. Gets impounded, and my boss is just super pissed. And at this point, it's a small community. At this point, the story's out. So I'm the guy that gets the DUI and the possession charge in a rehab van.
Legendary.
Yeah, the story still lives on.
If you're gonna do it, commit.
Right? Yeah, go big or go home, right? And so I'm in jail. I'm trying to get out, and it's just a nightmare because I'm in a different state, and the way they do bail there is differently. So I sit in county for 30 days. After getting into it with the judge. I was like, hey, this is my first mistake and all that. And she's like, this is not let's make a deal. You're going to jail. And I was like, well, I guess that's that. And so I get out, and turns out, I was worried because I had felonies here in the state too that I was on probation for. And I'm like, great. They're going to accelerate that, and I'm in a lot of trouble, and that's in Oklahoma as well as in Arizona. And so I get out and decide to bring myself back to the state of Oklahoma to handle it against the wishes of the state of Arizona. And
your parole officer did not want you to do that.
She did not. It was kind of a bummer. While I was in, actually, I was coordinating a trip back because I got out on December 15th of 2015, and my mom was like, I want you to come home for Christmas and you can handle all this. And I was like, great. And originally my PO was like, that's fine, we'll just fill out a travel pass. Well, it turns out that the rules don't allow that. And so I get out and go to meet with my probation officer, and she's like, so fun story, you can't leave the county or anything like that, we're going to force Oklahoma to extradite you. So if you could just wait around for us to rearrest you. Yeah, for us to rearrest you, you'll just sit in jail, and then Oklahoma will come pick you up, and then you're their problem. And so she also informed me that I was no longer welcome in the state of Arizona. So I got kicked out of a state, which is, yeah. So I got.
That's like worse than getting kicked out of a, like banned from a bar. Like you like the whole state.
Yeah, they're serious about
We
that.
don't want you
Yeah,
there.
they were like, "You're Oklahoma's problem now," and I was like, "Whatever." So I jump on a plane, and the last day that I'm here, I get a call from my PO that's like, "I hear you're in Oklahoma," and I was like, "Well, there's no point in lying to her." And I was like, "I am, but it's because I was trying to do this." And so she's like, "Well, come in and see me when you get back." And that was New Year's Eve of 2015. And I walk in to go see, and I had an idea that she was gonna like sanction me on my probation. I was like, I might do a week or anything like that. Well, it turns out I did 3.5 months in county.
In Arizona.
In Arizona, which is a bad time.
If you go to jail,
It's supposed to be fun.
you're gonna have a bad time.
You're gonna have a bad time. I got really good at pinochle and spades, but other than that, it was just wasted time. But it kind of taught me, I will say this about the correctional system. Nothing about being caged up like that wanted me to. Nothing but the environment would dictate that I wanted to make my life better. If anything, it taught me how to be a better criminal.
Mm-hmm.
So I get back to Oklahoma and get released pretty immediately, actually, and go see the judge. And she's like, "Well, you've done a lot of time, all things considered." So I end up not getting accelerated, which is just a miracle.
Here in Oklahoma. So they counted your time there.
They counted my time there, and they were like, "Listen, man, you messed up, but they really hammered you. So you're not in any further trouble here on the charge that you had," which was a miracle. And so I get out, and that alone was not enough to get me straight. I made it about a month.
Back here in
Oklahoma, I made it about a month until I decided one night after work that I should probably go get high again. And so I found myself this is when I really got in deep. This would have been about April of 2016, and got myself involved with some really bad people that were really connected. It was the first time I'd really dealt with, I'd say, organized crime. Prison gangs are ruthless. Unfortunately, we have a pretty notorious one here in Oklahoma, and they run a good amount of the drug trade. And I found myself in some really dangerous situations with those individuals, doing what I needed to do to get and stay high. And so within, April to the end of August, I managed to tag on 2 new overdoses that I survived. And then it was like, well, I should probably go to rehab again. So
This
So this would
overdosing
have been
thing's not
20
fun, right?
yeah, so this would be 2016.
16.
now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is 2 years
This,
ago.
yeah, so August of 2016, I go to Valley Hope again.
For the fifth time.
This is my second time at Valley Hope, my
But
fifth time in treatment.
rehab. Okay.
Yeah, and so yet again meet a really sweet girl. And really sweet girl, and I fell for it. She was like, I just got myself wrapped up in opiates, but she's like, I'm a youth pastor, and her husband is actually a really up and coming, or her ex-husband, I should say. Yeah.
Wait.
They were still married at the time,
Okay.
but they were in the middle of a divorce.
Okay.
And so we start dating, and it turns out it was not the picture that she had quite painted. And I was like, all right, so I relocate myself to Claremore, and we shack up together for a while. And I made it after treatment about a month and a half, but the entire month and a half that I was sober, she was getting high. And eventually, if you find yourself in that kind of situation, again, it was Alex not wanting to be alone. So I was like, well, I'd rather be miserable and with somebody than miserable and alone. And so eventually I was like, all right. So end up getting high in Tulsa, and did that off and on for a while, and then got myself into a sober living out there briefly, and then came back home and proceeded to just go back to doing exactly what I was doing before, using a lot. That would have been, boy. So I went to treatment in September of 2016 and found myself back at Valley Hope in February of 2017.
That was number 6?
That would be...
or number 7?
That would be number 6.
Okay.
Yeah. So, again, while I'm in treatment, I meet Michelle. God, this is so sick. And Michelle and I are hooking up while we're in treatment and get caught. And so they ask me, they're like, listen, man, you've been here 2 times already. You got to get it together. So I get kicked out of Valley Hope 2.5 weeks in. And the girl that I was involved with ends up going briefly to a new facility and then leaves. And at this point, I was like, I really do want to stay sober. And she checks herself out of this treatment facility. I'm in a really pretty reputable sober living and men's ministry mentorship program in the city. And I get a call from her and she's like, I'm coming back to Coma City. And I'm like, okay. And the first night that I met her, she was high. And I managed to hold it together for a while. And then one day, actually, just to kind of give you a picture of how sick we were together, I was not using, but she was sick. And I was like, listen, like, I have a guy. I was like, I'd rather deal with you not in this mindset. So I hook her up with my drug dealer in the city, just so that I didn't have to deal with her while she was sick, which is really selfish. But made it for a while, and then decide finally one day I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get high, and get high. We proceed to go on a little run together, and I found myself homeless in Oklahoma City. And about 2 weeks into getting high, we're at a 7-Eleven on, it was like 39th, and it's some not so great neighborhood in Oklahoma City. And she comes out of the bathroom and goes, do you know what to do if somebody's overdosing? And I said, yes. And she overdoses in the front seat of my truck and proceeds to just go lifeless. And I'm freaking out. So I'm doing 90 down, I-44 to try to get her to, I guess it'd be Baptist, and driving while giving her mouth to mouth and trying to resuscitate her and carry her in and, go in, and she lives. And at that point I was like, I need to get out of the city and do something. So I call my parents and tell them, hey, I need some help. And I go back to Tulsa and get into another program on there. And did well while I was up there for about a month and a half, and met a really great girl, actually, that was not that was like normal. Yeah. So and we had a really good, solid relationship, and things were really good for about 3 months. And I was coming home one day, driving down the turnpike, and decide, I think I want to get high today. So I get loaded. And that just, once I start, I'm gonna ride it until the wheels fall off. And so, oh boy.
So that would have been in 2017?
This would have been in 2017, yeah. Susan and I were supposed to go on a weekend getaway to the Wichita Mountains. We were gonna go camping, and things were gonna be good. We were serious, and it was a healthy relationship. And I end up going on a 4-day bender and standing her up for a vacation.
Oh.
Yeah.
That broke her heart.
It did. But, this girl was really pretty incredible. She's a sweetheart, and I wish her the best. So Memorial Day week, the weekend before Memorial Day, I'm just so depressed with my situation. And at this point, it's like, the drugs aren't working. They're not helping me feel any better. I'm depressed. I'm like, I want to kill myself. So I get into this massive argument with my mother one morning and decide, all right, this is it. So I grab 2 bottles of prescription pills and go to my bedroom and proceed to take all of them. And 3 days later, wake up in the intensive care unit at Norman Regional. Yeah, I mean, it was my first time being like, all right, that miserable. I want to kill myself. So, and here comes Susan walking in to be my, to support me. And, like I'm in this hospital bed with a catheter, like the whole deal, and just grungy, and, and she's like right there to support me. And I get out and decide I am going to try an alternative treatment for opiate addiction. And so I start taking Vivitrol, which is a medicine they give you. You get a shot once a month, but what it does is it binds to the receptor in the brain that is activated by opiates, and what it does is it's an opiate blocker. So you can use, but you feel no effect. There's no euphoria, and you don't get high. It's basically, And so I decided at this point, well, if I can't get high on heroin anymore, I should probably start doing crystal meth.
Of course, because
right.
What else would you do?
Just a hustler. You were a go-getter.
Yeah.
Very motivated.
So yeah, exactly. And I start to I go from being a daily heroin user to a daily IV crystal methamphetamine user, and I walk around usually probably about 230. Within about a month and a half, I was about 185 pounds and just looking dilapidated and just crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely off my rocker.
Well, meth does that to you.
Yeah, meth does that to you. It is not good for your mental health. Don't do it. And so that goes on throughout the summer, and naturally, like, I freak out on Susan one night in the middle of a meth psychosis, and she's like, "You're nuts, and we can't do this anymore." So we split up, and I didn't handle that well, because in my drug-addled brain, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. But so I found myself in Rob's Ranch again. This is number 7.
Yeah.
This
would have been the latter part of 2017.
This would have been September of 2017.
So a little over a year ago.
Yeah, a little over a year ago. And do 49 days of treatment, and on my first weekend pass, decide I should probably go get high one day and then just go back to treatment, like, freebie. And and so that wasn't the case. I ended up like disappearing for like a day or a day and a half, I forget what it was, and go back and proceed to just like vehemently deny that I'd used any drugs while I was gone, which obviously wasn't the case. They gave me a UA, and I was like, your UA is faulty, I didn't do anything. So they send it to a lab.
Like every addict ever.
Yeah, exactly.
Line?
Like, it's not me, it's your test.
It's everything else.
Why don't you trust me? Which is just a dumb question. And so like a week later, the lab results come in, and they're like, if you'd been honest with us, you could have stayed, but you were not. So I get kicked out of treatment again, and I go to a sober living house immediately.
In Oklahoma City?
In Oklahoma City, yeah. Another really good, with a really good solid group of guys. But Michelle comes back into the picture, the one that I had to revive in the front seat. And it's crazy how things come full circle, because I got out on September 28th. We got high the afternoon of the 28th. And then on the 29th, I went and picked up. And I remember picking up and doing a shot in the front seat of the car. And next thing I know, I am in the ICU at St. Anthony's. And apparently I had done too much, and I overdosed, and it killed me. I was dead for 3 minutes in the parking lot at this gas station on Northwest 23rd in Portland. And she actually, like I said, it's weird how things come full circle. She actually is the one that saved my life and called the ambulance, and they revived me. It was a bad deal. I had some cracked ribs from the compressions. I had edema, so I was coughing up a lot of blood. I was just in a really bad way. And so at this point, everyone's kind of putting their heads together, and they decide you should go to Teen Challenge. It's Teen Adult Challenge, and what it is it's actually, now let me preface this with saying I was not raised in a Christian household by any means, or a spiritual household at all. And so I find myself in a Assembly of God run, in this rehab center run solely by Assembly of God. And it's like not traditional like 12-step recovery. It's like you know, Jesus Christ will save your life, and
let's pray it away.
Yeah, exactly. Let's pray it away. That's exactly the. And it was, I was so out of my element while I was up there, and what that looked like was.
And whose bright idea was this?
It was one of the individuals that is pretty involved in the recovery industry here in the city, but he's like, listen, you've burned your bridges at every other.
This is our only option
yeah,
left.
Exactly. Like, this is option Z, and so I go and I spend 2 months there, and like, no joke, like, it was crazy. I had like people praying over me in tongues, and
oh my God.
Yeah.
And this is in 2018.
This is in
2017.
This is in 2017. This is from October through the beginning of December, and yeah. So I'm just constantly.
This is what I was raised with.
Yeah. Long story short, and what that looked like was like you'd wake up and go and work to try and earn money for the ministry. It's the people that you see like outside Walmart that are selling like wooden crosses and stuff like that. That was this program. And so like, you know, like what my day looked like was like morning Bible study, and then just being condemned for my sins, and so I make it a month and a half, and finally I call my folks and I'm like, listen, you guys can either like pick me up or like it's time to bail. And they were like, well, interestingly enough, we met somebody that has a job for you in the oil field. And so
because there's no drugs there.
Right, yeah, there's no dope in the oil field, right? And so I go to the oil field and immediately get back to it, and then so at this point, like, my folks are trying to do everything they can to like keep me from like, so like I'm not driving or anything like that, like, but I met just this really nice drug dealer that would deliver to me out in front of my house,
convenient.
At all hours of the night. So yeah, I had this guy come in and deliver him to me.
At your parents'
At my parents' house, which they were real pissed about when they found out about that. Yeah, I mean, long story short, I just chased my insanity for a long time, but May 5th of this year, I had just completely disappeared. I'd gone off the face of the earth. I took an Uber ride up to the city, turned my phone off, and was out for 6 days or so, homeless and hanging around at this disgusting trap house, if you will, just a drug house that was just a total shooting gallery. Like, you know, every moment of every day there was somebody in there that was doing heroin or meth or both, and things kind of went south there, and I found myself on the streets, and I called my parents and talked to them, and came back, and it decided it was just time to make some changes. And since then, you know, my family has certainly battled their fair share of addiction issues as well. My father is a recovered opiate addict, still a drinker. Alcohol has certainly, while I still partake, I have to be very careful with it too, because when I start drinking, I don't like to stop. But, you know, I live a very blessed life today as a result. But, we're talking about the stigmas of things. I know that opioid addiction and all of that has taken kind of a front page. It's very much in the face of the public now. 10 years ago, if you were an opiate addict, you were probably, in the eyes of the public, probably a lower class minority from an urban area. Today, if you are an opiate addict, you are probably a millennial Caucasian kid from the suburbs. I lost my best friend in 2017 to a methadone overdose in Arizona. That hit me pretty hard. And going back to when, as far as my regrets go, I think number one would probably be, besides the damage that I've done to my family and the trust, the guy that actually saved my life in that overdose in Arizona while I was in jail for that, because it was his connection. The police department decided it would be a better idea to hang the charges over him and to turn him into a confidential informant and allow him to stay on the streets. And Ian actually overdosed and died while I was there, so I didn't even get a chance to say, hey dude, thank you for not letting me die in this van. And that's hung over me. There's a lot of guilt and shame that comes with it, but I can also say that I'm a firm believer, and anybody that's listening to this that knows anybody that's battling this, I guess my two messages would be: A, there's a way out. You'll have a lot of people telling you that there's only one way out. My recommendation is do what works for you. If you can escape it, you have a story that's going to help somebody. And that's what keeps me going, is knowing that, yes, I've done some things. Yes, I have a criminal record. Yes, it's made my life more difficult. But at the end of the day, I can wake up and I know that day I don't have to hustle or steal or lie or manipulate to get a fix. I know that when I tell somebody that I'm going to do something, I'm able to show up and do it. I've restored my relationship with my nephew. I've restored my relationship with Felina. I was a ghost in our relationship for a long time, and today I can tell her literally anything, and vice versa. And that's happened separate from places. And so just regaining my integrity, and what it's really done for me is redefined the way that I look at myself and what self-respect is. It's not how much money I have in my bank account, or what car I drive, or whether or not I have a cute girlfriend. It's like, I can wake up today and try to be the best person that I can today. And if I mess up, I wake up tomorrow.
You get another chance.
And I get another chance to do it. And I don't have to put everybody else through my mess, because addiction it's a messy business. And unfortunately, as much as those of us that have been stuck in it like to say that it's, we're just hurting ourselves, it really is a family disease.
It hurts anybody who
it hurts,
loves you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately with addicts, what's really unique is that a lot of us have this like screw you, hurt me mentality. So it's like, you've hurt me, so I'm just going to hurt myself to get back at you, or I'll just use to get back at you. And it's nothing good comes from it. From the amount of time from the time I've started in recovery until now, I could say that between the people that I've met that were trying to get sober and all that, I could probably list off about 45 names of people that are no longer with us as a result of overdose. The statistics are what they are. I think one in 20 make it and stay off of it.
And I know something that you mentioned, just finding your own way. This last time, May 5th being the last time, and you didn't go to rehab this time.
No.
You just decided this time I'm going to do it my way, because I know we've talked about in the past, 12-step program and all these other things, and they say, don't drink even alcohol, don't do anything, and that doesn't work for you.
Right. It all comes down to me for personal happiness and integrity and finding some dignity again. And if you can find those things, there's no reason there should be no inner drive to go and pursue those self-destructive behaviors. So, I won't sit here and knock a 12-step program. I know a lot of people that it has worked for.
Sure.
It's worth trying. If you're in a spot, I would fully advocate saying go and give it a shot, because it might work for you. It's worked for a lot of people. It's a huge fellowship, and I've met a lot of great people that I still keep up with. I don't pursue that avenue because, A, I think I'm a little too prideful and stubborn, and I can admit that today. I don't like somebody telling me what I can and cannot do. And B, you have one life to live. Do what makes you happy. Don't invest in what's going to make everyone else happy, because it's just like myself with the relationships. If there's anything I've learned, it's that nobody can give me happiness, and I can't give another person happiness. I can share it.
Sure.
But I can't make anybody else happy, and vice versa. And so today it's just a matter of finding some joy in the little things, the things that really bring me a lot of joy today. I have a 5-year-old nephew that I'm trusted with, which never would have happened. In fact, to be honest with you, the day that he was born, before I even held him, I did a shot in the bathroom at the hospital before I went in to meet my nephew for the first time. And that bothered me for a long time, but now just seeing the goodness that comes out of it and getting out of it, I was a fish out of water. I'm not built for the street lifestyle. As tough as I'd like to act sometimes, I'm pretty soft. I'm not cut out for prison, and it's just
you seem to me to have found balance, and because I've known you in and out of rehab all these 7 times, and each time you came back, totally depriving yourself of absolutely any substance, including alcohol or marijuana, seemed to not work for you. Because like you said yourself, you're stubborn, and now you seem to have, you're different this time, I don't know if it's just my perception. I don't think it is. I mean, you seem to feel differently this time as well.
Yeah. And I've addressed my mental health issues. I think that's another thing that they carry a huge stigma. People that battle depression or anxiety, things like that, nobody wants to sit here and admit that they're sick. And I hate that term, but that's a big epidemic. Depression's very real. For me, it's been very paralyzing. So treating that, finding some balance there, and just redefining priorities
to manage the mental illness rather than,
you know, am I proud of the things that I've done in the past? No. Do I hang my head because of the things that I've done in the past? Absolutely not. Because if anything, you know, it's moments like this that put things into perspective. My life today is, while it's my life, is not about me. It's about sharing experiences and building genuine relationships and trying to, because I think that's really what it comes down to. You know, there's about 7 billion people on this earth. I feel like if we were meant to just do whatever we wanted to do with no consideration to anyone else, it would probably be more crazy out there than it already is. So it's just a matter of, you know, I find the joy in the people that I'm around. I surround myself with people that bring out the best in me, and that I feel like I can bring out the best in as well. And so, man, yeah, just there's a way out, and just do you. You know?
You can contact the podcast at brokebrokenpodcast@gmail.com. The Broken Podcast can be found on Twitter at Broke Broken Show, on Instagram and Facebook at Broke Broken Podcast.